Narcissists can survive anger. They can survive confrontation. They can survive your tears, your ultimatums, your silence when it comes from pain. They can even survive rejection. But there is one move they never recover from, and it is not what you think. The one move narcissists never recover from is strategic emotional withdrawal, not silence born from hurt, not the cold shoulder designed to punish, not the dramatic exit, strategic, deliberate, unannounced, the quiet, internal decision to stop being a source of emotional confirmation, permanently, calmly, and without explanation. That is the move. And for the next 22 minutes I am going to show you exactly why it works, what it does to them psychologically, and how to execute it in a way that doesn't just protect you, but fundamentally shifts the power structure of every dynamic you've been trapped inside. If you've ever dealt with someone like this, stay until the end. Because what happens after the silence is where the real power begins. Most people believe the way to disarm a narcissist is to fight back, to expose them, to finally say the thing that has been living in your chest for months, in front of the right people, at exactly the right moment. And there is a part of you, the part that has been patient too long, that has swallowed too much, that believes if you could just make them understand, if you could hold them accountable clearly enough, the record would be corrected, the truth would land, they would finally have to reckon. Pay attention to this. That belief is the trap, because the moment you engage, the moment you argue, explain, defend, or retaliate, you have handed them the one resource they cannot manufacture on their own: your energy. And energy in the hands of a narcissist is never wasted. It is stored, weaponized, returned to you at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible form. Fighting back is not power. Explaining yourself is not power. Confrontation on their terms, inside their preferred arena of chaos, is not power. These are the moves of someone who still believes the narcissist is playing the same game they are. Someone who still believes that if they say it right, calmly enough, clearly enough, firmly enough, the other person will finally hear them. They won't. Because the narcissist is not in the conversation to arrive at truth, they are in the conversation to maintain control, and every response you give them, every sentence, every emotional display, every clarification is confirmation that the control is working, that they still have reach, that you are still inside the radius of their influence. But here's where it gets darker. What the narcissist feeds on is not attention. That is the surface reading, the deeper truth, the one that changes how you understand every interaction you have ever had with them, is that what they feed on is emotional confirmation. The evidence delivered through your behavior that they have the ability to alter your internal state. Anger confirms it. Sadness confirms it. Defensiveness confirms it. Even visible happiness, if it is clearly a response to their approval, confirms it. Every emotional signal you emit that can be traced back to something they did is supply. It is proof of reach. And reach, for the narcissist, is the definition of power. Here is the mechanism. The narcissist does not have a stable, self-sustaining internal sense of identity. This is the foundational wound beneath all the behavior. At the core of the narcissistic operating system is a self that cannot confirm its own existence without external validation. They need to see the effect of themselves on others in order to feel real, in order to feel significant. Without the reflection, without the reaction, the scaffolding of their constructed self begins to destabilize. And that destabilization is not just uncomfortable, it is, at the level of their psychology, existentially threatening. Your reaction is not just feeding them. Your reaction is sustaining them. And your non-reaction is not just denying them attention. Your non-reaction is pulling the foundation out from under everything they have built themselves on top of. Now pay attention, because this changes everything. Most people, when they finally decide to stop reacting, do it wrong. They withdraw out of pain. They go silent because they have been pushed past their limit. And that kind of withdrawal, while completely understandable, is still readable. The narcissist can map it. They classify it under hurt, or offense, or emotional damage, and they know, with the precision of someone who has been reading people their entire life, exactly what pressure to apply to bring you back into the cycle. The strategic withdrawal is different. It is not performed, it is not signaled. It is the quiet, private, internally grounded decision to genuinely reassign your emotional energy away from their behavior and toward your own construction. Not to punish them, not to make a point, but because you have arrived at the clear-eyed understanding that their behavior is information about them, not instruction for you. Information does not require a reaction, it requires evaluation. Evaluation happens privately, and response, if it comes at all, comes on your timeline, from your positioning, on your terms. There is a kind of person who operates this way, who has built this as a way of being, not a temporary strategy, the silent strategist. They do not perform stillness, they inhabit it. They do not pretend to be unbothered, they have genuinely restructured what bothers them, and why. They are not unreadable because they are hiding. They are unreadable because they have nothing to prove. They move through rooms without announcing themselves. They process privately what others perform publicly. And in every interaction with someone trying to destabilize them, the silent strategist does the one thing the narcissist, at the deepest level, genuinely cannot handle. Nothing. Not aggressive nothing. Not punishing nothing. But authentic, unperformable, undisturbed nothing. The kind of calm that was there before the narcissist walked in and will be there long after they leave. And that calm, genuine, structurally built, not performed for effect, is the most disorienting thing the narcissist has ever encountered. And here is what that looks like in a real room with a real person. You are sitting across from someone who has spent months studying you. They know your rhythms. They know how long it takes before the silence becomes uncomfortable enough that you fill it. They know which topic makes your jaw tighten slightly before you catch yourself. They know the precise delivery, not too aggressive, not too obvious, that makes you feel the need to explain yourself even when you have nothing to explain. They make the comment casual, surgical, wrapped in plausible deniability, just sharp enough to land. And they watch, not dramatically, barely visibly, but they are watching. Because what they are looking for is data. The micro-expression, the slight shift in posture, the breath that comes just a little faster, that is the confirmation they came for. That is the entire purpose of the interaction, not the words. The response to the words, and on this particular day, they get nothing, not a flinch, not a deflection, not a visible effort to remain composed, because visible effort is still a reaction, just continuity. The same energy before the comment and after it, unbroken, undisturbed. You look at them with the same measured presence you walked in with. You respond, if you respond at all, to the surface content of what was said, not the hidden architecture beneath it. And for a fraction of a second, something moves behind their eyes, not anger yet. Something older and quieter than anger, confusion, because the variable they were certain of just produced an unexpected result. And people who rely on certainty about others do not handle unexpected results well. Most people fail at this point, because when you first begin to withdraw, when you first hold the stillness, the narcissist does not quietly accept it. They escalate. They find the sharper edge, the more targeted provocation, the scenario that is too outrageous, too personal, too publicly delivered to ignore. And the escalation feels like evidence that you should respond. It feels justified. It feels like finally the behavior is undeniable, like finally you have the ammunition to say something, and maybe you do. But this is the moment that separates the reactive person from the strategic one. The escalation is not an invitation to engage. The escalation is proof that the strategy is working. It is the sound of the narcissist's operating system beginning to malfunction, and the correct response to a malfunctioning system is not to hand it new fuel. It is to observe it from a distance without emotion and let it run out on its own. Write this down. Power does not belong to the one who speaks loudest. Power does not belong to the one who argues most precisely or exposes most convincingly. Power belongs to the one who cannot be manipulated, the one whose internal state is not for sale, the one whose reactions are chosen, not extracted, the one who moves through the game with full awareness of every piece on the board and reveals nothing about their own position until they decide to. This is the Machiavellian principle that most people only graze the surface of. He did not write about power as something you take from others. He wrote about power as something you build through positioning, through information management, through the discipline of never letting your opponents know exactly where you stand. The prince who can be read is the prince who can be played. And that principle applies to every room you walk into, every relationship you navigate, every interaction with someone who has been studying the edges of your emotional architecture for longer than you realized. Because here is what the narcissist knows about you that you may not fully know about yourself. They know which topics make you defend yourself. They know which criticisms make you over-explain. They know which silences make you fill the space. They know which withdrawals make you pursue. They have a detailed, experientially derived map of your emotional responses, and that map is the weapon. The moment you stop confirming the map, the moment your responses no longer match their predictions, the weapon stops functioning. But here's where it gets darker. Because losing the map is not just an inconvenience for the narcissist, it is a crisis. Think about what it means to have built your entire relational strategy around the predictability of another person's emotional responses. Think about what it means to have no internal compass of your own, no stable sense of who you are outside of the confirmation loop, and then to have that loop suddenly go quiet. The narcissist is not just losing leverage over you. They are losing the external structure that tells them who they are in relation to you. And without that structure, something genuinely frightening begins to surface for them. Not remorse, not accountability, but a raw, unprocessed experience of their own interior, which is exactly the place they have spent their entire lives constructing elaborate systems to avoid. This is why the silent strategist is not just effective. They are, at the psychological level, the most threatening presence the narcissist has ever encountered, not because they attack, but because their very existence, their unshakable, unconfirming, non-reactive presence, forces the narcissist into the one confrontation they were never prepared for, the one with themselves. This is the part narcissists never expect. When you hold the strategic withdrawal through the escalation, when every probe meets the same calm, when every provocation meets the same measured, emotionally neutral presence, something specific begins to happen inside the narcissist that they were not built to process. They lose the story. The private, internal narrative that says they are in control of you, that they have reach, that your emotional state is in some meaningful way a reflection of their power, and that story is not just a belief they hold, it is the load-bearing wall of their constructed identity. Remove it, quietly, consistently, without drama, and the rest begins to follow. They will test your silence. They will attempt to re-establish the old pattern through routes you haven't closed yet. A comment designed to sting, delivered in front of others. A sudden warmth, disarming and familiar, designed to make you lower the wall. A rumor, a carefully placed inaccuracy, designed to provoke a correction. Each one is a probe. Each one is asking the same question. Are you still reachable? Are you still inside the radius? And each time the answer is the same, not angry, not wounded, just a calm and incomprehensible absence of the expected response. The probe becomes increasingly desperate, and desperation in someone who has built their entire self around the performance of control, is a very particular kind of collapse. They may pursue more openly. They may become unpredictable in ways they never were before. They may seek validation from adjacent people in your world, working outward from the center because the center is no longer accessible. All of it is information. None of it requires your participation. But here's where it gets darker still. The narcissist, when they lose the confirmation loop, when the map no longer works and the escalation no longer produces results, will arrive at something they have very little experience navigating: genuine disorientation, because the version of you they built their entire strategy around no longer exists. The buttons have been removed, the access points have been closed, and they are left for perhaps the first time with nothing to work with, no reaction to harvest, no emotional confirmation to collect, no evidence of reach, just their own reflection, returned to them calmly and without comment. And that is what they were never built to receive. Not accusation, not exposure, not the final confrontation, just the quiet, unassailable mirror of someone who finally stopped needing them to be anything other than what they are. That is the thing that cracks the narcissist at the level where nothing else could reach, not because it attacks them, but because it removes the one thing their entire psychological architecture depends on: your participation. Now let's talk about what this costs you, because I would be doing you a disservice if I made this sound easy. Strategic emotional withdrawal is not a switch you flip. It is not a decision you make once and then coast on. It is a discipline, and like any genuine discipline, it will be tested, not occasionally, but continuously, and almost always at the worst possible moment. You will be in a room where the provocation is so precisely targeted that staying still will feel physically difficult. Your nervous system will light up, the adrenaline will arrive, the words will line themselves up in your mind with perfect clarity, in exactly the right order, and they will feel justified because they are. You will have every right to say them, and you will choose not to, not because you are weak, not because you are afraid, but because you understand something in that moment that most people never arrive at, that the response, no matter how righteous, costs more than the silence. That distinction between what you have the right to do and what it is strategically sound to do is where most people lose the game. They confuse moral correctness with strategic advantage, and the narcissist has spent their entire life exploiting precisely that confusion. They provoke until you feel justified responding, and the moment you do, the moment righteousness overrides strategy, they have you. Not because your point was wrong, because the response itself was the goal. The silent strategist understands this not as a philosophy, but as a reflex. They have internalized it deeply enough that the question is no longer "should I respond?" The question has become "what does responding cost? And is that cost worth the return?" And most of the time, in the interactions that matter, in the rooms where the power dynamics are still being established, the answer is no. The silence is worth more. The stillness is the message, and the message lands harder than any sentence ever could. There is also something that happens to you, internally, privately, when you begin to hold this posture consistently, something that has nothing to do with the narcissist at all. You begin to discover that your emotional responses belong to you in a way you never fully experienced before. Because for most people who have been in close proximity to a narcissist for any significant period of time, their emotional landscape has been colonized, their reactions have been trained, their internal signals have been so frequently manipulated, so consistently reframed, so persistently gaslit, that they have lost the ability to clearly identify what they actually feel versus what they have been conditioned to feel. And the withdrawal, the act of pulling your emotional availability away from the narcissist and returning it to yourself, begins to reverse that. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, you start to hear yourself again. Not the version of you that formed in response to their behavior, the version that existed before they arrived and is still there, waiting, under everything that has been layered on top of it. That recovery, that return to yourself, is not a side effect of the strategy. It is the point. The narcissist was never the real story. You were always the real story. The work was never about defeating them. It was always about reclaiming the interior territory they occupied without your full awareness or consent. And every day you hold the strategic withdrawal, every room you walk into as the silent strategist, every probe you meet with undisturbed calm, every escalation you observe without engaging, you are taking back ground, quietly, permanently, in a way that requires no one's permission and no one's acknowledgement. The most powerful move is not attack. It is not confrontation. It is not the perfectly worded statement delivered in the right room at the right time. It is the decision to become genuinely, internally, structurally unreachable, in the place where their words used to land and leave a mark, in the place where their approval used to mean something, in the interior space where you used to process their behavior as though it carried weight that belonged to you. Becoming unreachable at that level is not a performance. It is not a strategy you deploy and then retire. It is the slow, quiet, sometimes uncomfortable work of building an internal architecture that does not require their confirmation to remain standing. It is the work of the silent strategist, and it produces something the narcissist has never encountered from you before. The version of you they spent so long studying, mapping, testing, probing, no longer exists in the form they knew. That is the one move they never recover from. Not because it destroys them, but because it leaves them with the only thing they were never equipped to face: themselves. Have you ever watched someone lose composure the moment you stopped reacting? The moment the silence held and they had nothing left to push against? Drop it in the comments, because someone watching right now needs to know they are not alone in what they have been trying to name. And if this shifted something for you, if it gave language to a dynamic you have been navigating without the right framework, share it with one person who is still inside it, because some people are one idea away from taking their power back. Thanks for watching.